Hello everyone, and welcome back to Kiwi Talks About 40k Things. Now, re-listening to the Siege of Terra series while at work, it got a familiar sort of annoyance back into my mind, but then thinking about it, it actually evolved into something else more interesting I thought I would discuss. So the annoyance was the Perpetuals. Listening to Erda's bloody garbage just pissed me off, but then I got thinking about it a little bit more, and there's something else that annoyed me even more about the Perpetuals, and that is Ollanius Pius. Now I know what you're thinking. What? Ollanius Pius, the guardsman who stood up to Horus against the Emperor, and that's an amazing story. And it is. But it's ruined because it's a Perpetual. Because it's a 50,000-year-old immortal human who was best friends of the Emperor when they were both children, and they fought, against evil witches, and they, destroyed the Tower of Babel and blah 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 blah. Doesn't that devalue the story a little bit? It's not just some random human, motivated by faith and duty sacrificing himself for his lord. It's this 30,000, 40,000 year old BFF friend. And doesn't that take the magic out of it? Doesn't that take the specialness out of it? The idea that it could be any normal slob, any normal soldier, motivated by faith and duty alone? Having it be an immortal friend of the Emperor's just devalues it. And it bothered me even more when I realized that the Siege of Terra series actually has two better candidates for Ollanius Pius than the actual Ollanius Pius. The first one is what I'll call the fake out. So in Saturnine, which is my favourite of the Siege of Terra books, it has a character, or it has the newly reformed Remembrances, or Interrogator Corps, which end up becoming the Inquisition, but they go out to Eternity Wall Spaceport, and one of the interrogators meets up with an old guardsman. He's about 50 years old, bushy beard, and his name is Ollie Piers. No, he just goes by Ols, or he just goes by Piers. And it's an interesting character because he has the vibe of an old soldier. He's been there, he's done it before, he's fought for a long time. He talks about how soldiers lie, how they joke and lie to cover up PTSD, and how they sort of make shit up and exaggerate their deeds, and he goes on about the soldiery camaraderie, and he makes points about how, sometimes a story is more important than the truth, and the importance of keeping morale up, and it's an actual interesting sort of tale, and he makes up bullshit stories to give to the Remembrancer, and in the end, one of the story, how he dies, is he stands alone defending a banner of the Emperor against Demon Primarch Angron. Now that's a frickin' badass death. And he's even, come on Angron, let's get it in here, as he's firing his plasma gun at him. Badass death. And that becomes manipulated through lies, half-truths, propaganda, and the Remembrances, records, into him dying, standing up against Horus himself, defeating the Emperor. And now when I first read that, I went, oh, that's really quite clever. It's sort of an analogy for the misinformation of the Imperium. It's an analogy for, how the truth has been warped into myth, and there's not much of the truth left. That's quite cool. I would actually respect that. If there wasn't an actual Ollanius Pius making his way to Terra at that moment in another chapter of the book, who we all know is going to be the real Ollanius Pius. So it was kind of spoiled by the actual perpetual Ollanius Pius. Otherwise, that would have been quite a neat sort of anecdote and a quite neat version of Ollanius Pius. But then, listening to the whole series, I realised there's actually one candidate even better than this one for the role of Ollanius Pius, and that is Katsuhiro. Now, introduced in The Lost and the Damned, you get introduced to a conscript named Katsuhiro. Now, Katsuhiro is a Dragon Nation citizen. He's a Chinaman, basically. That's what the Dragon Nation is. He's a Chinaman who was a third grade... He was basically a low-level bureaucrat working in a food processing plant. A third grade nutrient enumerous specialist. But basically it translates to he was a low-level bureaucrat working in a food processing plant in China. So absolute slub, dead end, 9-to-5 job, little nobody. He serves in the trenches as a conscript, scared shitless out of his mind. While he's there, he sees Sanguinius in person, he sees Jagatai Khan in person, he sees the two of them fighting together. He witnesses Space Marines, he sees Titans, he fights back against mutants and abhumans. Even though he's constantly scared shitless and, wishing to die, he still keeps fighting, he still keeps up hope, he doesn't drink the poison shell water and kill himself like some of his comrades does, and he keeps going. He makes it back into the city, and he keeps fighting all the way throughout the siege. During that time, he discovers the Lectitio Divinitatis and becomes a fervent worshipper of the Emperor. He, he's handed a abandoned baby from out in the wastes, and he dedicates himself to protecting it. So even while he's fighting off, cultists and shit, he's got baby in one arm, freaking las carbine in the other. He ends up meeting up with Euphrates Keeler and becoming one of her bodyguards, serving in her congregation. Ends up at the Hollow Mountain, survives, ends up being just an imperial hero, basically. Like, think about it, from the outworks of the palace all the way to the Hollow Mountain. He serves loyally and faithfully. He discovers faith in the Emperor. He stands his ground against all horrors. He sees amazing things that no one else would ever see. That's just a better candidate. Now think about it. Just change his ending a little bit. Instead of him, maybe even him following Euphrates Keeler, for a while of it. And then have him be separated. End up on the Vengeful Spirit. I mean, the Impossible City, or the Inevitable City, depending on what version. Well, it is actually the Inevitable City. But end up in the Inevitable City, navigating his way through the twisted warp hellscape. And have him end up popping out in the throne room. Have him popping out in Horus's throne room, in the Lupercal court. Just imagine that. Guardsman just no idea where the hell he is, what the hell's happening. He just appears in a dark chamber, and he sees Horus with his maul standing over the Emperor. Instantly, this guardsman just runs, lasgun on full auto, blasting at Horus, putting himself in between the line of fire between himself and the Emperor. And then he gets minced. That is a better Ollanius Pius. That is any common man, just a common man, discovering faith, loyalty, and duty, and sacrificing his life for his God, his Lord, his King of Ages. That is a true Ollanius Pius story. And that's what it should have been. It should have been that. I don't know how they missed so badly. Well, the answer is because of fucking Cabal, and I hate that novel for the crap it introduced into the Horus Heresy series. They already had an Ollanius Pius, they already had a John Grammaticus, they already had this set up, thanks to No Fear and Cabal, so they couldn't change it, so they basically just had to stick with the horse they had. But Katsuhiro is what Ollanius Pius should have been. And I know another thing someone else is going to mention. Oh, what about the baby horror, baby Katsuhiro was carrying? I think it would actually be even more poignant if he was still carrying the baby when Horus minces him and then maybe he steps on the baby or something. Now, I know that's cold and callous, kill the innocent baby off, but think about how evil as fuck Horus would be if he just casually kills a baby like it's nothing. Like, if there's anything that could prove how much of an evil fuck you are, it's just mincing a baby. Like, I think even the Emperor in his emotion-deprived state at the time would just look at that and go, yeah, Horus, you're fucked, and just blast him with his warp powers. So, I'm just disappointed. I'm just disappointed in the end. Games Workshop had the Black Library team, I should say, had the perfect Ollanius Pius all written, but because of the pre-existing character, they had to go back to the perpetual, immortal 30,000-year-old version, which is not as interesting. I'm sorry, it just isn't. The story of Ollanius Pius should be the story of average guardsman giving his life for the Emperor, and that's what Katsuhiro does. So, I don't know, maybe I'm talking shit, but let me know what you think, and remember, if you hate my opinions, in the words of Games Workshop, you will not be missed.